So the thing I was gonna start with, but we're living on the Wild West, we're out of order. I was gonna. Why even bother doing side quests in your game? Because you could very easily have a entire D&D campaign, and you just everything is focused. You could run Lord of the Rings in your D&D game, and just everything is about getting to Mordor, and that's the game, and be perfectly fine. You know, there's no obligation to have like side content, side quest shit. I'm gonna throw it at you here, Isaiah. What do you think would be the main reason for you? What do you think the main reason for even having side quests in your game?
As someone who's running the game, or as like a potential player?
No, running.
It's mainly to let the players explore their characters more. Often when everything is really tightly knit and it's all about the main story. It's about my story, guys. We're all in this together, but it's my story. Yeah, no. You often see a reduced amount of the characters that you would get otherwise, right? Like, if everything is about life or death decisions, you don't get to know if a character might have some issues with their family. There might be something that they've maybe you don't get to know the characters. This sounds dumb to say, but their hobbies, shit they do in downtime, things that lead to more questions than just yeses or nos. It's oh, why does your character do this? Why does your character one of the things that I really liked about oh god, what was Cardell's character in Avernus?
Riemann?
Riemann, yeah. His whole thing of oh god, what was it? Was he a cobbler? Was that what his father was?
The Hell Rider stuff?
More than that. He had his time. Oh no, sorry. I was thinking that's a different character. His time as a squire.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, what was it like for you being a Hell Rider's kid? You know, and he's oh, it was rough. It's boot camp, really, right? So it's like ROTC. You sort of held to a schedule. You got to be all super. It's and you can go. Did that? How do you think that affected your childhood, man? And you look at the Aasimar, whose whole thing is self-flagellation. And you're I mean, the answer's pretty apparent, but I just kind of want to hear it from you.
Nah, he's probably fine.
Yeah, he's all right.
No trauma at all.
Yeah, no, dead, but no.
Yeah.
Alexa played Daddy Wasn't There from the Austin Powers soundtrack.
Interesting. You came up with a very selfless answer. So that means I have to be a selfish piece of shit. Because pretty much all my train of thoughts were for me as a GM was where my head went immediately, why I would want to run a side quest for my purposes. You're not necessarily wrong, though. It's true that if you do a side quest, if you do a little side story that's outside the normal purview. I don't know why that was hard. Outside the normal oh my god.
Purview
of the main story, you will sometimes see a side. I'm saying the word side too much, but a side of the PCs that you might not otherwise see. A perspective,
if you will.
A perspective. There we go. Synonyms are good. But yeah, that's totally a thing. There's a side quest about this little boy who's trying to train to be a knight, and we needed to help him do X, Y, or Z thing. And through that process, the paladin character, the player reveals that, oh, the paladin actually had a really rough childhood and didn't know their parents. And there's no way that was going to come up in the main plot line, but because this little side story thing happened to be somewhat related, boom, bang, boom, you get more out of it. Mm-hmm. Definitely a thing. Now, if I'm going to be a selfish prick, however, for me, I think one of the best reasons, personally... Oh, actually, I say BSL. I did write down one of my notes, show a different side of the PCs. So I guess I was thinking about that a little bit.
There you go.
All right, I guess I'm not as heinous as I thought. But the first one I wrote down is a little bit of a mental break for the GM. I think it's a really good reason to have a side quest in this. And what I mean is, by changing up the pace of things, it can give you a little brain pause, a little brain reset. So, you know, using my game, it's like everything's always relating back to the dredge, and there's this primary problem. They're this, like, you know, they're a force of nature, right? So they're just ever present all the fucking time. So by having there be little tidbits of other stuff that you occasionally run into, that lets me as a GM have a little pause, chill out from the main tension, and also show a little extra, like, oh, here's a little other, like, tidbit of world building you might not have seen, or something like that. And it's just, it helps with the pacing of things, you know, it changes up the pacing in the same way that if you have 5 sessions of incredibly brutal and violent combat, maybe have a couple of sessions of, like, no one dies. You know, yeah. A good example is the session where you guys arrived at the town of Starwater in the Mana Grove, and you guys just sort of dingle-dangled around in the town of Bumbledeefuck Nowhere out in the boonies. And it was just a good little mental pause, and then Django saw very confused casual racism.
Yeah. Gotta love it.
In multiple ways, in fact. But yeah, like, it's a good little, it's like a breather for your brain.
Look, man, the take 5 sessions do be real, though. Like,
yeah,
I've definitely had those where,
totally think,
you know, if shit gets really heavy and you just like, hey guys, y'all want to go gambling? And they're like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, well, and I think some GMs are maybe, I mean, I don't know if I want to say afraid, but, like, reluctant to have those sessions where you kind of bumbledeefuck around, because, you know, they're worried about wasting people's time. You know, it's like, oh, we all showed up to dungeon fuck and kill monsters, and we are not killing monsters nor dungeon fucking. What is even the point of this session? But you can still get shit out of sessions like that, you know? And often what you end up getting out of it will catch you as a GM by surprise, because those are often the type of sessions where there's the most leeway for the players to just, like, do a thing randomly that you weren't expecting or wouldn't have ever thought of. Mm-hmm. You know? And sometimes that one little bumbledeefuck session will lead into something else that could be more important than you were expecting. Like, there's lots of, like, room there because it's a collaborative thing, right? Because there's 5 people or more doing all of this together. Leaving open blank spaces will sometimes make, you know, random shit appear when you leave the door open. Like,
oh, for sure. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't use, like, like, stuff characters said on, like, a one-off session to, like, influence what goes on for potentially, like, a specific backstory session for that person or character, you know? Yeah. If someone's whole thing is like, oh, well, I got, you know, excommunicated from my tribe, you know, I couldn't just, you know, I didn't fit in. And then you're like, okay, well, why didn't you fit in? What about this? What about that? What about this? And then you start thinking about it more, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that stuff happens all the time. And then also, if you rope it back in to whatever's going on, then the player suddenly feels a little bit more, like, emotional investment, because they're like, oh, that was the thing I brought up. I did that.
Yeah, I did, like, retroactive giving a shit is definitely real.
Yes.
Like, I've definitely had that thing, and I can't think of a specific one in your game, but I've, like, definitely had that thing where it's like, God, why the fuck are we doing this stupid ass side quest? Fuck me, I don't want to be here. And then it turns out, like, you know, that the character that you thought was a nobody became a badass in the time skip, and then they saved you when you were like, oh,
yeah,
we're just boned, aren't we? And they show up and you're like, hey, oh, thank God that was for something.
Yeah, I mean, movies do that kind of thing all the time. Movies and shows is a very common maneuver. So yes, definitely. And, you know, maybe maybe you have to sacrifice a session or two of your players being annoyed for you to, be like, surprise, motherfuckers, 10 sessions down the line. But, it's okay. Sometimes you do that. Just let them be a little annoyed. Just kind of, pretend to play stupid.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is potentially a controversial opinion. Sometimes players being annoyed isn't always like a full sail bad thing, Like,